one. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:03. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Okay, we do need to add something to the consent agenda under exiting employees, personnel changes. Lisa Rubin, grade 4 OCA, is exiting. So if you want to update your personnel changes for that. Is there any other? Okay. So with that change, all of those in agreement, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. Is there anybody here who'd like to speak to us? I didn't have any let's talks, did you? And who's the Okay, perfect. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Can I get someone to make the motion?
I move to approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
second.
I want to pull two things from it, the October 11th minutes and the child nutrition act policy.
Okay, so we have to pull it, all right, so one in the, sorry, the federal children's nutrition one, is that what you said? Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of the consent agenda minus the minutes and the one policy, RNSU policy, signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, minutes. Can I get someone to make a motion?
Move we accept minutes.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Natalie.
So I had a brief question about October 11th, and it's on page 5. Find it.
No, I wasn't able to find it. To go to the
It was on
Is it the budget parameters section?
No, this is just the minutes from 2 meetings ago, the October 11th.
Is it page 5 of those minutes or
Page 5 of those
the
minutes,
supplemental?
yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be page 5 overall. It's page 6 of 62.
Okay.
So this is a discussion I remember having, but I don't remember this detail of it. So according to the minutes, Kevin Thornton suggested the board needs to replace the 60-year-old equipment and spend more than this in the room tech ed programs. As Bertrand stated that there is $175,000 appropriated for next summer. I don't remember the figure, and I'd like to know where it is. I haven't been able to find that budget information, so that's the question.
So back in April or May, and I can find it here. It's gonna take me a minute. When we were reviewing summer projects, which I believe was back in May, we approved summer projects, but we also noted that there is $175,000 on that is set aside for Devin's program once he determines what he needs through his Roland Foundation work. And so, on the 5/18/2022 minutes, under supplemental documents, it's actually the first thing that comes up. Facility fund requests. And under that, it has a 1 next to it. This here. Needs next 2 to 5 years, let's see, so where is?
Yeah, it's listed as 2+.
2 plus. So, but I believe we all think that, yeah, there it is, $175,000 for shop plans. Review and prioritize future investments. But it's probably gonna be this coming year once he knows what, I mean, that is what Brenda put in there, and that's what I'm going with, because I would assume
Okay,
that.
so, sorry.
No, so my assumption is that once his Roland Foundation work is done and he knows what he needs, and he speaks with all of whoever he needs to speak to and figure out, then we would go ahead and approve whatever he, up to that number, or maybe more, if that's what he needs.
Okay, is there a budgetary document or, that, we can that's publicly available, we can access it?
For next year?
Yeah.
No, not yet. That has not been, Brenda was still meeting with principals as of last week.
I just know that, we've got probably 6 weeks before we have to face that hard budget deadline, and I just like to know what's going on more than I do with the budget. So that's it with what I have to raise about the emails.
Okay. So is there any changes that you, yeah?
No.
Just to clarify though, the money that is, we haven't approved it,
We haven't,
but,
no, but it's there, and we know that,
and it's not something that's to do with our budget, it's something out of our facilities.
Right, it's out of the facilities.
So despite what happens with the budget, we can still use our
Facilities.
sinking fund, whatever we call it.
That actually raises another issue, is that we had a discussion last spring about what was facilities and what was not. It was very unclear to me that I can't remember who now, but some people said, well, new machines would not be out of the facilities funds, they have to come out of the budget. I think Superintendent Collins said that. I raised the issue of the library tables at Nesh should be coming out of facilities and funds. So it's very unclear to me what counts as a facility and what isn't, and I don't want to miss a deadline to have this very important discussion about appropriating this money.
so we'll know more as we go forward, but we won't see the budget. First budget we will see will be December,
Okay.
the first week of December. Yes.
And can I, at the next meeting, principals are all coming and they will talk about specific facilities needs and things that they're prioritizing in this budget.
Again, I just want to be clear that we don't have an unfortunate discussion in May that, we should have appropriated this money in December. I just don't want that.
Okay.
Then quick question or clarification, and if those people, Devin, would go to principals and say, I need this money.
That's
So we would assume that they've already asked for the funds that they need in the budget that we're going to review.
Well, if he's supposed to wait until after his Roland's up, though, that pushes it a year down the road.
The monies that he would ask for this budget would be the things that he would use in his normal wear and tear. Anything that would be new, I would expect would come out of our facilities fund. I know he has already talked about that he needs to do some infrastructure work, that would come out of facilities. Probably new tables and things like that would as well, to be completely honest. We have done that before. The new SUV, lunch tables and things came out of facilities funds. We can do that if we need to. Okay? All right.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
When the sabbatical Roland Fund project ends, when you say a year, is that a year from right now? So he was here last week. Is he on, is it the middle of that, or is it a year from, is it school year?
The Roland Fellowship's for a year, but the school couldn't find a replacement for him, so he's kind of working through the fellowship with trip to Germany scheduled at some point too.
Right, and I believe it's a July 1 to June 30, because it follows the school year. Okay, so, you've also asked to pull off the RNESU policy, so, we pulled off the minutes, I just need everyone to, accept the minutes as they were written, so all of those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. So the next one was the RNESU policy for action, which was the revised JH Federal Child Nutrition Act Wellness Policy. Can I get someone to make a motion, please?
Move to accept the policy.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Thank you. Kevin, what was your?
So this is just a matter of timing. I had a conversation this week with someone who approached me and said that they were very concerned that children were going hungry in their district and missing dinners and not being fed on weekends. And I was wondering, I know the superintendent spent a lot of her professional career thinking about problems like this. I was wondering if there's any approach that is being considered or that we could take to help solve this problem, such as, I don't know, some kind of alliance with Everybody Eats, or handing out box meals late in the day through the SOAR program, or anything like that. Just wanted to note that this concern has been raised with me. The person mentioned that the old Boys and Girls Club used to feed kids at night. That hasn't happened in many years. Is there anything that we can or should be considering?
So I would say that each individual school does manage that if they know of specific students and families. So we do provide things in students' backpacks, by putting it in a plastic bag that maybe is something that other families or other students wouldn't necessarily see. So counselors already do that. So I would encourage people, if they have knowledge of a specific student or family, that they should definitely reach out to the elementary school counselor. We are also currently in the process of reviewing our bids for the lunch program, which always opens up other opportunities for grants and programs to support the community. So I do know that we are thinking about that a lot. The pandemic definitely illustrated how many families have food insecurity. We do the fresh fruits and vegetables every other week through Veggie and Go. That's one way we support the community, but we are certainly always on the lookout for additional opportunities. So people are welcome to email me if they know of grants or opportunities.
Any discussion other than that on
No.
this policy?
I
Okay.
actually
Yeah.
have some discussion on this policy.
Sure.
Thank you for pointing that out, Kevin. With the, let's see what it is. In the policy, it says that there's guidelines, nutrition guidelines that the meals all have to meet. Does that get verified somehow? Like it says that that the breakfast and lunch have to meet the USDA standards. It references some national school lunch guidelines and programs. But my kids are in elementary school and I see the breakfast menu and some of the items on there. I'm not a dietitian or a nutritionist, but I'm pretty sure blueberry and enough for breakfast and meet the standards. So yeah, I don't know if are they verified.
So it's a good question. My answer is twofold. One, it's verified in the sense that we have a vendor and the vendor has a manager that works underneath Brenda Fleming. So it's verified in the sense that each of them reports to the manager who reports to Brenda. We do check on it quite a bit. We get plenty of feedback from students and staff about the quality of breakfast and lunch. We do know that there's a lot of folks that are very interested because we're out to bid again this year looking at another program for a variety of reasons, ranging from is it truly nutritious to is it appealing looking to is what shows up on our menus actually what students are serving. But as far as the menu goes, whatever they post, the menu actually definitely does comply. But we know that there are shortages all over the place, and so a lot of times, you know, what you may see or feel in a supermarket, the food service vendor feels times 10 when they're trying to provide breakfast and lunch. So there definitely are disconnects between the menus that are posted and what our students are being fed. We hope to, as the world continues to right itself, and the food chain, you know, continues to evolve and hopefully improve, that some of that is alleviated, but now is the time, just like with if you know of grants, if you are very interested in breakfast, lunch, school nutrition, reach out to Brenda Fleming, you can reach out to myself or any of the school principals. They are taking a hard look at it this year.
You know when the bid to be accepted is
Usually it's the spring, early spring. I think they need the food service contract signed by, say, March or April, so I would guess have a conversation with Brenda after the first of the year.
Question. Did we just hire the lowest bidder? Is that how we do it?
No, that is not, no.
And I will say, we use a vendor that is pretty much in almost every school system around us, except many school systems are moving towards doing things in-house. But with workforce staff shortages, that adds a whole new layer of concern. So it's not an easy process.
I actually watched a YouTube video on school lunch programs, right, and how it's sort of evolved over the years. And a lot of these foods are engineered to meet the requirements. So it's good and bad in a way.
That makes me nervous when you say engineer.
Well, I mean, you know, so money obviously comes into play, right? So
Right.
how do we meet the requirement, but just?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty fascinating stuff, you know, like you hear the stories about ketchup being considered a vegetable and things like that.
Oh, sure. Other questions on this policy? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of the Federal Child Nutrition Act wellness policy, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Monitoring report 2.2, treatment of staff. Hopefully you had a chance to look this over. This would be based on last year. Anybody have any questions? Does someone want to make a motion to accept and then we can discuss?
I move to accept.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
So I'm going to surprise you all. My usual complaint with school documents is that they're very badly written and unclear and that don't mean anything. I think this is pretty clear and straightforward.
Anything surprise you or? Okay. I'll make you go, wow, we did that fast. All right, any other questions about this executive limitation? No? Okay, all those in favor of monitoring report 2.2, treatment of staff, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. And so our next one, we have two this month, is another monitoring report, which is 2.8, communication and support to the board. Can I get someone to make a motion, please? Is that you, Barbara?
Me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Natalie.
I'll second it.
Okay, and Barbara seconding it. Thank you. Any discussion? No? Okay. Well, hearing none, all those in favor of 2.8 communication and support to the board, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Perfect. Okay, our board monitoring report is 3.3, delegation to the superintendent. We provided last year's for you to look at. And the question would be is if you had any additional examples, which we don't actually have any on here, or a different interpretation as to what this means. So can I get someone to make a motion to accept? Okay, second? Anyone? Thank you. Okay, discussion.
So I have a question about, or not a question, I want to raise the issue of ends and means.
Okay.
Under 3.31, which is page,
I have it right in front of me.
thank you, yeah, 42. So, this gets to the heart of some of my problems with policy governance. The last line here, all issues that are not ends issues is defined here are means issues. But we also say that the policies should be developed systematically from the broadest, most general level to more defined levels and move. So how defined is defined for us? Because I continually run into, it's a very frustrating issue for me of being told you are violating policy governance. This is not board business. We cannot talk about these things. And the distinction between these things that are ends and means seems very unclear to me. It also seems to me, based on my experience in the board, that the real action is in the means. That these global policies that I think further down, we're all in favor of kids being able to be lifelong learners and to understand general concepts and that whole list. That's great, but the nitty-gritty of what the schools do and what the school board, in my opinion, should do is to talk about these more specific and immediate concerns that we face as a community and as a school system. So, that ambiguity seems to be built into the cake here, terrible metaphor, baked into the cake here. I think we're going to continually run across this problem unless we deal with it.
Derek?
I don't see it as a problem at all. I don't believe that it is a problem. And it's not a problem for me. And I've been through some training and I have some understanding of how policy governance guides the organization and the roles and responsibilities of the board and how we delegate much of what you say the nitty-gritty is to the superintendent and to the local administrations to carry out. It's kind of like the board is sort of the fire tower, looking for where there might be fire and smoke. We're not the ones that go and put out the fire. We're the ones that are visioning and asking questions and providing some leadership. There's a different role here than doing the nitty-gritty work. That's not our job, as I see it. And I think that policy governance does outline that difference clearly. That's my opinion.
I'll just add that I agree with that our job is not to develop the means, it's to develop the ends, and that the staff and the superintendent and the principals are developing the curriculum and doing all those things, and we're overseeing it and making sure that it's being done in the manner that they say that it's going to be done and that it's meeting our goals. We're not micromanaging. That's not our job.
If I may, let me raise a specific example. We're obligated to vote on the budget every year and approve it. Unless we understand what's in that budget, how it's being spent, where, unless we have vigorous discussions about things like where money may be wasted, are we really doing our job? I mean, if our job is to just say, oh, well, we trusted our professionals to present us with this budget, it must be good, therefore let's rubber stamp it. I don't think we're doing our job. I don't think that's what voters want. I don't think that's what the legislature intended. I don't think that's the purpose of the board.
Go ahead, Derek.
I differ with you on the perception that the board is rubber stamping. I take offense to that term. I don't think that's our job, is to rubber stamp things. I think our job is to delegate to our professionals, yes, and to get the best from them. I trust. If I could say something about, I'll talk about that later, thanks.
I think when it comes to the budget, for your example, we have asked the superintendent to come up with a budget that allows us to educate our kids to meet our ends. And in that respect, they bring forth the budget because it's their means in order to determine what they need in order to do that. And so that is how the budget is created. And so essentially, we're not necessarily rubber stamping, but at the end of the day, we're approving a number. That's what we're approving. And we approve the budget because statutorily we are required to do so.
And I'd also
No.
add that we're not in the trenches. How would we know what everybody needs? I mean, we need to listen to the people who are there every day and see it. They're the experts, not us. We're just making sure that the bottom line makes sense, that it seems fair across the board, and that our students are getting what they need.
Right.
I guess I kind of see a little bit of both here, right? Because to your point, if we're not in the trenches, how do we make a real decision? How do we know? And I think to Kevin's point, I can see where we've taken the red tape away from the district and kind of put it on us, right? So if you did want something resolved in a timely manner, there are a lot of limitations to what we would have to do something about it, right? So I think there's a bit of both there. I think we have to have things the way that they are, but I do think that maybe we could make things easier on ourselves if we did see an issue in some ways, so that we had a faster avenue to kind of get it right and to get into the trenches to see what's going on. So I guess I feel like I'm rating a bit on this one.
So that is, well, so as far as getting into the trenches, that's why we hired a superintendent. So if you find out that something is going on, you should alert her immediately. And that's how you get into the trenches faster.
I want to be clear that I'm not talking about distrusting people or wanting to interfere with their professional duties. That's not the case. It's a question of fulfilling our duties and fulfilling them by understanding what's happening. And that, it seems to me, would at times, in certain circumstances, depending, require us to say, hey, this is really out of whack. I've had all sorts of people complaining about blah, blah, blah. Maybe we need to do such and such differently.
Sure.
And then to be told, oh, you're out of your lane, Kevin. You're violating policy governance by interfering, crossing this invisible line between the duties of the board and the administration. It just doesn't work. We've had many frustrating discussions on this board, and it's frustrating for me, where this issue arises again and again and again, and it seems to me contradictory to our duties as elected officials required by the state to oversee these budgets. I mean, on the one hand, we're being told, you know, put the green eye shades on, make sure everything's fair. I mean, that's why we have these monthly financial reports. You know, check every number, make sure nothing's going wrong. And on the other hand, we're told, well, you know, we can't do anything, we have to leave it to someone else. They present us with one number. You know, the first time I was on the board and the budget discussion came up and we got that PowerPoint, I was like, well, you know, this is new to me, the details have been worked out already. I'll just have to kind of catch up and figure out what's going along, how things are going. But now I'm at the point where we're saying, well, we get presented with this budget pretty late. You know, we're told you have a few weeks to decide on this. And there's no time to look at it in any detail, particularly if you're not a numbers person, which I most clearly am not. It just doesn't seem to me that we are fulfilling our duties in this most important aspect, really the most important thing to do. And again, this distinction between ends and means, and what I consider these invisible lines between what we're allowed to say and what we're not allowed to say, very, very frustrating.
I'd like to hear what Greg had to say first before we do any point of order, because Greg did raise his hand.
Certainly. Yeah. I have to remember what I was going to say. You know, I was on the board. A lot of us were on school boards before we merged and did policy governance. Remember, we did micromanage a lot, and you know, I voted for policy governance to move away from that, obviously. But it doesn't mean policy governance is perfect. I don't think we should just say, oh, this is the perfect governance model. There's a lot of boards in the state that don't want to do it. Middlebury doesn't want to do it. They're like specifically staying away. There's a lot of boards throughout the state that were policy governance are moving away because people on boards aren't happy. So there's nothing wrong with challenging. This is a new concept. It's only been around for, I think it was developed in the 70s, but in main practice, it's still relatively new. I don't think we should be afraid of challenging it. We definitely don't want to go back to micromanaging. You know, we had superintendents before there was policy governance. You know, so it's not like we hired them for that reason. But I do think that we still, in the budget process, we get to go a little deeper into it. The budget season, as I remember it, is kind of the same as it was before policy governance. It's a very short time frame. We can get as involved as we want. I haven't seen us stop ourselves from talking about the budget too much. But I do, to Kevin's point, wish we could allow for when we want to challenge an end, how much we want to really talk about that end. And instead of just saying, oh, policy governance, why don't we can just vote on it? You know, do we want to go in this direction? Just have it be that instead of policy governance.
Well, to that end, there is a new person at the SVBA, Phil Moore, who is big into policy governance, who might be able to help us with that. If you guys are so inclined to him coming down and meeting with us.
So allowing us to
Go ahead.
He's big into good governance.
Right, sorry,
not
good
policy
governance. But he knows a lot about policy governance. So.
because I think that we don't want to think of it as a binary. Micromanaging policy governance, I agree, somewhere in the middle would be great. I definitely don't, I remember going into a locker room and choosing what color epoxy we're putting. That's micromanaging. We don't need to all take a field trip again and do something.
Natalie?
Back to the budget. I deal with a lot of budgets. I can't remember our process. Do people come to us and just let us know what they're going to be spending? Do we get an overview of what the money is going to be spent on? So
Brenda does an overview of the whole entire budget for us.
So we know what programs we may be supporting, what's going to be bought. We have that breakdown so that you know, we have the information.
If there's any major changes from last year to this year, she will notate them for you. And she will show the whole budget on December, whatever date we're meeting.
Yeah.
And then we will look at that budget every meeting that we have right up until we approve it in January. And we usually have an extra meeting in January to do that.
I just think also what makes good policy governance is having good information. So if we had the information at the outset, maybe that would make Kevin feel better about what we're talking about. You know, what is the art department doing? What are the different areas doing? Where are the changes? Something like that, some kind of quick overview bullet point.
And she'll do that during her presentation. Okay, so back to the policy. You were saying point of order. Did you want to go back to the policy?
What policy are we discussing?
3.3.
3.3. So we're not talking about governance.
No, we're talking about delegation to the superintendent. Essentially, I think what this is supposed to say is that we don't ask to approve the epoxy in the boys and girls bathrooms. We leave that to the administration and to Kristen. What we get involved in is making sure that our ends say what we want our kids to be able to do by the time that they leave our school. By the time that they're a senior and heading off to wherever they're going. You know where you're going? Okay, good. Well, that's a good step in the right direction. So, and making sure that they have everything that they need in order to be successful in that next step. So that's our job. Our other job is to look out 5 and 10 years and see what we might need. If it's a middle school, if it's, you know, what other things might be out there on the horizon. But the actual running of the schools, we leave to Kristen and her team. Yes, sir.
So, 3.3.2, Kevin, I think speaks to what you were saying. And I have felt some frustration too with feeling, I'm new to this board, having been a parent going to school board meetings and watching the proceedings and the way people were voting. I often felt like things were just being rubber stamped. This board's the first board I've been on with policy governance, and so I've read up a bit on it and tried to understand it. And from my understanding, it seems like our job is to address your concerns, 3.3.2, which is to limit the latitude of the superintendent. So it's the primary thing we can do, which requires all of us to do what I think is the really hard thing, which is to challenge the superintendent. I don't know about anyone else here, but I feel like a jerk when I do things like that, but I think that's what needs to be done. I think it's really hard to do. I think many people have a hard time saying, no, actually, this doesn't look good or that doesn't look good. So I agree with you, Kevin. I don't feel like things are just being rubber stamped. But I think that's because it's all of our responsibility to make sure they're not being rubber stamped. And I think no matter what framework we use, it's still going to come down to the same thing, of holding people accountable and making good decisions, which, from the way I understand policy governance, it puts us in the position of having those uncomfortable conversations with people of, well, why are you doing this? What's your validation for doing that? Here's all the background information. So that's something I feel like I haven't seen historically, going back to district consolidated. Felt like there were lots of presentations where there were budget numbers put on the screen up there and voted on, but they were terrible math. And it was like there was clearly an agenda where I remember this one specifically. It was like column A was the agenda that was trying to be promoted, and it had listed all the net benefits, and then columns B, C, D were all the net negative points of those policies. And so you had like, here's the positives of the thing that we want, and here's all the negatives of the thing that we don't want, but it didn't have the negatives of the thing there's wanted and positive things that are not wanted. And so that's where I feel like policy governance, as I see it, can be good, as long as we're all willing to deeply question the information provided to us and ask what the assumptions are and be really precise and detailed.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm glad you said that, Sharon. That is exactly where the accountability comes in policy governance, is holding the superintendent accountable. And we do that through the monitoring reports. And if we don't agree with the superintendent's interpretation and the data that the superintendent provides for that interpretation, we can certainly challenge that, and we should challenge that. And we can also ask those kinds of questions of the superintendent to get more information and ask her to bring back certain information. We don't have to wait to a prescribed cycle of topics, although we have that to make sure that it gets done where the monitoring reports occur throughout the year, so we make sure we cover those bases. But if something does come up, we can certainly ask for that information and get more of a monitoring response from the superintendent at any time that we have concerns and need more information that we don't feel that we're getting. I think it's there. I think it's built in, and it's the hard work of asking those questions and maybe having an uncomfortable conversation.
Yes, Brent, sorry.
I guess the hard thing is, right, I mean, when you're talking with parents or teachers or whoever, no one ever says, I want to talk to you about this policy, right? So there's a disconnect between the people who we're representing and what the board fundamentally does, right? So when they come with an issue, it's okay, then I guess it's on us, right, to go back and review the policies and figure out how does this fit. But it's hard because we don't have all the information, right? So when someone comes to us with what should be, in their minds, an obvious issue, obviously if someone comes to us passionate about whatever they're talking about. So, and if I were to say to them, well, I don't know anything about that, well, that doesn't look good for me, one.
Well,
But then I can turn around and try to research that, right?
Well,
But-
there's a couple things you could do. Number one, you could say, you know, I'm not sure about that, I'll ask the superintendent and I'll get back to you. Doesn't make you look like a jerk, and you will find out the information and get back to them.
Yeah,
So, and if it's an issue with a teacher or, you know, something, they need to talk to the teacher or talk to the principal. That's the only thing that we can offer, is that they need to talk to the administration. If they're not happy with that, then they go to Kristen. That is our modus operandi.
but my point is, no one ever says, let's talk, I want to talk to you about 2.3.
No, you're right, they
Yeah.
absolutely don't. But we might reference 2.3 if we're talking, or 2.2 when we're talking to, you know, parents or students. So, Carl.
Just to that point, I mean, I had a conversation this week with someone who's a parent in the district, and we just, got talking, and he started, sharing with me a lot of opinions about things, and I said, oh, there's this great thing on the website, the Let's Talk, and that's been a really helpful avenue for people to take, because it does, I said, it takes you right to the superintendent, they get, goes right to her, and to get the feedback immediately. It's way quicker than him telling me and then me trying to remember what he said. Plus, I'm not in the position to actually affect any of the specific changes, single-handedly. So I always like to point people in that direction. It's a really good tool. So bear that in mind.
So is there anything else, do we have anything else to add to our 3.3 delegation to the superintendent? I was going to add that the first bulleted point, or the thing at the beginning, since we don't have anything for examples, the first one at the very top of the page that doesn't have a number, the board will instruct the superintendent, blah, blah, blah. We do have OVU policies, so I'm going to put that in there, unless someone has an obvious reason why we shouldn't. And
Sorry,
then,
where are we?
the very top where it says the board will instruct the superintendent through written policies that prescribe the organizational lines, blah, blah, blah. And it says the board will lay the parameters in writing, policies so that it's clear. Those are our OBUB policies. Okay? The next one talks about developing policies. I wanted to, our examples of this year, I know we changed 2.6. At one point, we added 2.9. And we also added a couple of other small caveats that I couldn't remember to make things more clear. They're in our minutes, but I know we did make some changes. So if anybody doesn't want me to put that there, please tell me. And then number 2, executive limitations. Those are our executive limitations, where it talks about how we're limiting the superintendent. That is how we do that, is through those. And I didn't get to the back, but does anybody else have anything else they want to add to this?
I have one more thing to say, and that is, I want to be clear, especially if anybody's watching this at 3 a.m. and they can't sleep, that I'm not criticizing the superintendent. For one thing, it's way too early to be jumping down her throat in her tenure. I have no reason to be critical of her at this time. I'm really criticizing the board and how the board does its business. I think that was our fault.
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Since it's something I've thought about a lot, and I've wondered when to bring it up, and I guess the delegation of superintendent makes sense. And it kind of speaks to maybe what Kevin's getting at. And I've always kind of wondered, okay, so I know we can develop these policies, which is an end, that then if we all vote on it, is something the superintendent has to reflect on how to create the means to get there. But, besides these bigger, policies that we come up, if there's something, we're not in the trenches, but we are reflective of the community. And say, I'm just going to throw out a specific. I'm not saying we should do this or anything, but it's just something that I often hear people talk about, which is, I wish there was a way the Stafford kids could feel more connected to their experience well-being. So if I keep hearing that all the time, and then we as a board say, we kind of feel the same way. It's not really a policy, but we want it, and that is an end. If we say we want the Stafford kids to feel more connected to their experience with well-being. If that's our end, but it's not a policy, can we vote on something like that, but it's not a policy? What is it? What have we just created, and when and can we do those things? That's just an example.
Well, yeah, no. So I guess my first thought is that if you were to bring that up, we would ask Kristen to find out what the administration does right now for Stafford kids, or to ask Stafford kids what they're not getting. I think that we would ask the administration to do that, and then come up with a plan, and that would have to be their plan. I mean, we can bring it up and talk about it.
I'm not saying
but
we
I
create the
know.
plan. I'm just
Right.
saying. But even if we hear, they do this, can we still just say,
Yeah, you bring it up, and
this
then
is something that we value, our community values?
I think so.
And then, okay,
Agree?
even if there is a plan in place, we're just reiterating, this is kind of one of our priorities. I'm not saying that is.
No,
But
I get it.
we've just found something.
It's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Well, no, I know it is, and I'm using that as an example, but, and I'm sure you guys are already on top of it, so we
Well,
don't have to bring it up.
It would be the same for the kids that are over at Castleton. The
Yeah.
seniors, they don't feel connected to Otter
Yes.
Valley anymore either. And
But
why would
that is a different experience, but absolutely. I
Yeah,
agree.
but they're all still seniors.
But I'm kind of talking more generally, because to me, that's a more specific end. And maybe that's what you're getting at. Like, we value our community. Really, I'm feeling like a strong push to come to the board and convince all of you. The community values this thing. I think we should take it seriously. And now I'm here to convince you, and if you guys say yes,
And then we pay it off.
But it's not a means. It's a little more specific. Does that speak to anything you want?
Yeah, I have a serious question about it, which is, when do you bring it up? I mean, we have a very restricted agenda. Brendan told you this summer that one of the things that I wanted you to think about was how boards operate. This board is the only board I've ever been on that has no other business. It's very, very difficult at times to bring up things you want to talk about. So 45 years from now when you're on a board, I'm long gone. I want you to think about how boards actually work. And one of the big problems I have with this board is that at times it feels almost impossible to raise issues. So that's one of your lessons for your future, to think about how things actually work, because the details of how they work really impact what is done.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yep, if you were
No,
just saying,
that's a serious
were you
question.
gonna answer
I didn't bring that up.
when we can
So normally you would bring, those kinds of things we would add to the agenda,
So
you know.
just contact.
either Kristen or myself.
I mean, I've sent an email
Yep.
to Kristen and Lori and said, this is something I want to talk about. I'm not expecting it to happen today, right when I say it. It needs to be thought about and put in,
Yep.
with some thought.
Well, I had a very frustrating experience last year of raising the issue, volunteering, and then it was in November, and it didn't get on the schedule until February, and then
And then you didn't come to the
That's
meeting.
right, I missed that meeting, so it didn't come up till April. So, at which point, I made a little spluttering 4-minute speech and nothing happened. That's just an unacceptably long delay. And I know that between February and April is my fault, but between November and February is just too long. And that's why I think we need to have another business on our agendas all the time, because things come up. And people have ideas, and people have conversations with community members. This is a concern I want to raise.
How long should our meetings be though? Because that would make it a 3-hour meeting.
Well, we have a time limit, but we are allowed to vote on having a time limit that gets extended. At this point, I want to get back to 3.3. So let's go back to that, please. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to add to that, or are they good with the way it is? Okay, all of those in favor of 3.3, please signify by saying aye.
Quick question, are we voting on the report or on?
On the report. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those against? Okay. All right, so the next thing that is on our agenda is the OVU policies for action, which is our global ends policy, which we talked about at our last meeting, but couldn't come to a consensus as to where we needed to put the benchmarks, where it would work. And so I gave you guys the assignment of, determining where that needed to go so that it made more sense. Because we knew that we wanted it to be in there, or at least that's what it was the last time. So, if I can get someone to make a motion, then we can discuss where that needs to go. And then we can have real new ends.
I move to approve.
Okay? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so, who was really smart and decided where this needed to go?
I think we talked about this a while ago, and I had suggested saying that 1.0 be the overall end. Otter Valley School District, sorry, it's so little, exists so that all enrolled students are empowered with the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed to be successful and contributing citizens to the global success. So that's like an overall statement. And then I would say they accomplish this through the following ways, which then it would be academic proficiency, communication. Those would all be bullets underneath that 1.0. So that's how we measure it. And we say, so we do benchmarks to the top. So at the end of the first sentence in the 1.0, this is just my suggestion. We accomplish this through the following means or ways, which are benchmarked by reports at grades 2, 6, 8, and 12. And then you have a colon, and then you have those 5 points.
Which are benchmark what? I'm sorry.
Last
Through
line.
reports,
Okay, which are benchmarked.
Sorry, Nick.
that wording may not be perfect, but
Okay.
something to that effect. Which are benchmarked by reporting out on the following items or something like that. Because it doesn't, to me, it didn't seem to make sense to have 1.0, a full sentence, and then you have 1.1, academic proficiency, and there's no description.
So these are accomplished through the following, through the following ways, which are benchmarked or reported out at the following, they're reported
Which
out
are
at the following.
evaluated and benchmarked through the following, by reviewing the following categories or something. You can totally disagree with me.
Well, if anybody's, you know,
Yeah, so a sentence here that brings this in here, and then these all follow after.
By empowering students in the following ways, as reported out, as the percentages 2, 6, 8, and 12, colon, 1.1.
so do you want to read that again, because I don't think everybody heard it.
So just have your 1.0 global ends. Then the last sentence, we accomplish this by empowering students in the following ways, comma, reported out as benchmarks in grades 2, 6, 8, and 12,
Yeah.
colon, 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
Should we call those 1.1 to 1.6 ends?
They are ends, that's why they're there.
Right, so should that sentence instead of be ways be ends?
Oh,
In the following-
I understand what you're
following
saying.
ends?
well, next question.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I also wanted to add, since we talked about Stafford and student satisfaction, would student satisfaction follow underneath one of these ends that we have? Because I think that would be an important one.
Would that
And
be
I
under
was
their
kind of-
well-being?
I was looking at well-being and others, but,
I looked at all the things in my note
Yeah.
and bring up where I think they might fit. So in 2.9.3, under equity, it says the superintendent shall not fail to seek out and incorporate student input in order to develop and maintain a safe and inclusive environment for each and every student. That particular concern seems like a requirement of that.
Not to insult any students who might happen to be in the room, but sometimes student satisfaction is not a good measurement because people, as they grow older, realize that at times that something they didn't like learning was necessary, or some teacher that they felt was hard on them was actually raising their expectations. So we can't fall into the trap of, which is, this is a big problem in universities, that student evaluations have way too much sway. Just want to throw that out.
Yeah, the policy doesn't reference satisfaction. It just says, it says the superintendent maintains safety and an inclusive environment for each student.
Well, and wasn't it Padra who said that when we send her a survey next year, she's going to be like, I'm not filling that out, but maybe in 3 or 4 years, she might fill it out and say, yeah, we did an okay job.
I believe my words were that in 2 years, 3 years, whatever, when I get the first one, I'll be like, yeah, this place sucks. And then another 2 years after, I'll be like, okay, hang on a second. 2 years after that, I'll be like, okay, maybe I did learn something.
So, might not want to put, satisfaction in there right now. So,
Well, some of the value is in seeing if all the students said this particular aspect of the school is what sucked, then maybe there's something to that, as opposed to
Yeah.
just one or two people saying that.
So I'm gonna throw out a general observation and then ask a couple of them specifically. My general observation is I have a lived in memory of having consultants on Zoom telling us, cut this in half, make it simple, and now it's twice as long as it was. The specific question I have is about Global Citizenship C. Students study a non-native language and understand the importance of learning about other cultures. Are we requiring that Otter Valley, RNESU students study foreign language as a graduation requirement now? Is it?
Yeah, right? Yeah. It's a full credit. Oh, two, it's a full credit, right?
They have.
Yeah. So we came up with these, I think you weren't at that meeting. This is basically, what was the list from, Kristen? It was like the state requirements for kids to graduate.
with the portrait of a graduate, that's what we used.
And then my other, I guess, call it an observation or maybe an objection, learner agency. Students take ownership of their own learning is, the phrase take ownership is, it's from therapy, it's a very loose term. I don't really know what it means to take ownership of anything. If we want to say students take responsibility for their own learning, are we in a position now of saying to somebody who's learning disabled, it's your own fault that you didn't meet the state standard? I think we might be better off just dropping this.
Well, I just wanted to, so if someone is on an IEP, then they are
We
help.
still strive to help that student develop.
Yeah, I'm
learner
having
agency.
kids on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So
It's
Don't
not
have
about
an
me,
issue with this.
learner agency doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they meet challenging, rigorous standards. I don't disagree that the language of ownership to us as adults is probably vague. I would disagree though to students at these benchmarks, they probably have language that their teachers have worked with them about when we say learner agency, this is what we mean. Again, the high school is the messiest, most work to do part. Our elementary school students are much further along. You can take the bullets, you can take the A's and C's out if you want to keep it safe.
Oh, it's for,
But it's a measuring, right?
I
I
think-
mean, we chose it because we have a way to measure it.
Do you have a way to measure ownership?
No, we chose it because the portrait of a graduate is specific about when we say learner agency, this is what it might look like. Just so I'm super, uber clear, we do not have ways to measure all of these things. We're definitely not in compliance of all of the global ones.
oh, look at that. That was one of the things that our people said was that, every year we might get a little better. And like, we strive for 100%, and every year we get a little bit better.
Well, some of these are not quantifiable. I mean, students take into consideration multiple points of view.
Teachers would know that if they had heard that. And I'm sure it's on a report card somewhere. Forever? Oh,
Well, I'm just gonna observe as, anecdotally, so my kids are in 7th grade, and depending on how much I think you wanna know, you can know quite a bit about your kids' assignments, and that is possibly true all the way up through high school, through power school.
You can be invited into your kids' classrooms.
Yeah, so you can, as a parent, or even, look pretty in depth at what the assignments are asking and what it seems like they're attempting to teach or learn. And if, like I say, anecdotally, it seems like a lot of these things are being accomplished or attempted to be accomplished. Working in groups, taking initiative. I think when there's teamwork, there's lots of ways, I'm sure, that professionals have of measuring these things that we think of as unmeasurable, as they observe the students and how they're executing a task or working with their fellow students. So it does seem like there are ways of assessing these things that we think of as intangible or slippery.
I was just gonna say, and I hope people don't get upset by this, but just because something isn't measurable, I don't wanna like, oh, well, we don't want that as a goal or an end in a person's education. And I do think there is possibly ways. Not, a kid is never, even the brightest student, is probably not gonna show ownership in every single subject by every teacher. But maybe there's one class where like this kid is owning this education or her education in this one subject. But I still do like this as a form of life. It's not
Yes.
I guess a couple things that I want to clarify in my mind that, I don't hate this. I guess what I hate fundamentally is we already have a disconnect, I think, between the board and parents, right? I feel like the global ends should be very simple. That someone who's got 5 minutes and wants to understand what the vision for the school district is can go pull it up, read it, and understand it. I don't think we've accomplished that with this, but there's a lot of good stuff in it. So, I'm not saying I dislike it, but I don't think it's what we should strive for.
I just want to add that I think that these are broad enough that allows us to do a bunch of to have a lot of different means to get there. So this is the end that we're talking about, but there's a lot of different ways we can reach that end.
So I will also put out there that when we first started this process, when you read our global ends, all you read was 1.0, essentially. There was nothing else there. So read that and tell me what that means. And we realized that, and so that's when we put in this additional part. And then we realized that for Jean, at the time, it wasn't measurable. There was no way to break it down and tell us how the kids are doing based on this stuff. So that's when we started looking at this again. I like the fact that we are finally starting to get to a point where we're having presentations about how the kids are doing. We had one last month, and I'm hoping that we're going to have one every month. Maybe not during budget season, maybe not in December, but maybe. And I'm hoping also that Kristen will be able to take portions of this and present on them and see where we are on these. And then I think what we need to do at this point is approve them and try them out. And then we can see what doesn't work, what does work, and then we can adjust again. But we gotta try something. Because before we don't know if we were doing any of this. Just my opinion. Jeremy.
To go back to the benchmark line,
Sure.
I have a question for you, Kristen, which is, so we're saying all of these things have to be benchmarked. Are all of these things able to be benchmarked, or are we asking you to ask the
Point out where the benchmark markers are.
It's right at the top.
The,
Oh, right.
yeah, that's the one we were gonna add to
We were talking about
1.0,
Okay,
giving
thank
up,
you.
to say all of the following ends would be evaluated and benchmarked at the grades listed. And Kristen, you said all these things can't be quantified, so are we asking you to quantify the things that can't be quantified here? Or is there a way to report and benchmark them without quantifying them?
So at the end level, at the standard level, the 1.1, yes. From 1.1 all the way to 1.6. 1.0, no. When you get down to the A, Bs, and Cs, also no. So we can at this point, again, still not in compliance, but, and to be honest, most of these ends are not ever going to be in compliance, they'll always be in progress, right? You're kidding yourself if you say that, you know, all of our students are proficient with academic proficiency or with communication, right? Those things are a moving target, partly because our standards continue to evolve, but at the standard level, yes, we can report out generally how students are doing at grades 2, 6, 8, and 12. But when you get down into the weeds of A, B, and C, no. Some of those are going to be a lot of work to figure out a way to report out.
I have a question about the word benchmark. We will need benchmark. Benchmark are the grades, right? Benchmark is grade 2, benchmark 4.
At the end of grade 2,
Right,
grade
so
3.
it's just a report out for the benchmark grades of, we're not benchmarking them.
Yeah, I thought there were benchmarks they were meeting.
So we're doing a report of second grade for these categories under well-being and global citizen. So the report is for each one of those in grades, in the benchmark grades that we identified.
Based on, following what Greg and Jeremy said, I think we have to be very suspicious of this idea of measurement, that the idea that we have to have benchmarks and measurables comes from the business schools, you know, that we need to know what our profits are, we need to know what our debts are and so forth, we need quarterly reports to these things, we need to know how income flow, all of those sorts of things. And it's always about money. Which is something easy to measure. And that idea seeps somehow from the business schools into the ed schools. And this notion, it's incredibly vague, that we can quantify things like, you know, students communicate through a variety of media, or students take into consideration multiple points of view. You can't, as Kristen pointed out, it's a useless task to try to measure that, and it's a phony one to say that we are, you know, measuring the performance of the superintendent by how many students take into consideration multiple points of view. It can't happen. So, you know, when we talk about each other, we say so-and-so is a good person, or so-and-so is someone you can always rely on, or so-and-so is a good citizen. That's what we want to create. We want to create good people and good citizens in our school system. And to say that, you know, they're 0.87% of the way to being a perfect citizen, as opposed to so-and-so who's only 0.62% of the way, it can't happen. It's a ridiculous way of thinking. We should drop it. We do want measurement on how, you know, kids are doing testing and grades, and how many incidents of you know, violence there are in the schools, and things that we can measure. That's great. But the things we can't measure, we shouldn't pretend that we can. It's a fool's errand, and it's just going to make useless work for the superintendent. There's plenty of other things to do.
I think that you can measure some of that by what courses we are teaching them. We're not saying that they've actually absorbed it, but they're being presented with it. So they're hearing different viewpoints. It's up to the child to take ownership of what they've been taught. But if we're giving them the information, so this, the end allows us to have the means. I think that, I'm saying it again, but this tells us we should have different viewpoints in our curriculum. We should think about well-being in our curriculum. So if it's quantifiable in that respect, we're not going to say every single kid can speak Spanish. That's not necessarily what we're looking for. We just want to know that we're working towards a well-rounded individual, and that includes having these types of curriculum and courses and exposing them to different things. I don't think we're looking for numbers necessarily in the reports.
Right.
But doesn't having all of this fluff language in there that's somewhat subjective about how we quantify it, doesn't that take away from the power of what these are supposed to do?
let me ask you this, this was put together by the teachers, correct? The Portrait of a Graduate?
Well, it's the state of Vermont's portrait of a graduate, and departments and department heads are still finalizing it. Otter Valley's draft doesn't have all of these bullets are not a part of Otter Valley's draft, not even close.
Okay.
I thought you guys said, I wasn't at the meeting either, but this was developed from the portrait of a graduate.
It is, the Vermont portrait of a graduate.
Oh, not Otter Valley, shouldn't we be doing this?
Otter Valley's isn't.
Oh. So we'll just be at this event.
But at the standard level, those stand, right? Those are graduation requirements, just like transferable skills are. So at the standard level, we asked all of our students in grades 2, 6, 8, and 12 to focus on academic proficiency, communication, critical thinking and problem solving, citizenship, learner agency, and well-being. The A, B, and C, no.
So that will,
That will be-
maybe look at once we get our portrait of graduate done.
Maybe, but then again, just remember, the portrait of a graduate is what does your exiting 12th grader, what was their experience overall? So when you talk about the A, B, and C, it might be hard to report out on B in second grade because that's developmentally not appropriate until 8th grade. So if you're looking for a report out on B, then, right, so that becomes cumbersome, I guess. If you keep the standards, it's very doable. And it doesn't mean you won't see all of these language, because again, this is the language that students and teachers are using.
So this could be misleading if we say benchmarks reported as 2, 6. If you're saying those aren't even realistic.
Well, it isn't that the grade levels aren't realistic. I think that the word benchmark is potentially confusing. So it's a benchmark grade as opposed to a benchmark assessment, right? Those are the grades that the board, that was the will of the board, those are the grades that we want to hear about. So you could say, we accomplished this by empowering students in the following ends, comma, reported out in grades 2, 6, 8, and 12. Take out the language of benchmark. I would recommend you just keep the standard, but that's just because that makes my reports cleaner. But if you keep the A, B's, and C's in, that's the will of the board.
Well, you could just add after each one, which may include but not limited to.
You lost me a little bit. I think removing the benchmark is, I'd love to know how the second graders are doing. But burdening you, and frankly, that's how I read it, that you would be required to report out the second graders have made X amount of progress in learner agency. I don't want to put you in, or a future superintendent in that position. So, getting reports at those different levels of education, that's fine, but I think maybe we should dump the word benchmark. Just to clear up confusion for everyone now and in the future.
I agree.
Are there any other changes that you want to make based on comments that we're hearing? So at this point, we're leaving it as is with what is your sentence say?
We accomplished this by empowering students in the following ends, comma, reported out in grades 2, 6, 8, and 12. We're keeping all the A, B, C, C's.
Yeah, and we're getting rid of the last sentence because you've incorporated that good stuff.
Can you just remind me where the A, B, and C's come from? Us? At a board meeting or something? Is that right?
You were there, but you came in late,
Oh.
and that's okay. And so the A, B's, and C's came from that portrait of a graduate form that we were looking at, that Kristen showed us.
And everybody's happy.
I think we start there, and if we realize that it's not worth it, then we can dump them later on. Or monitor and or adjust. Jeremy?
I agree with what you say, with what you just said. And I'd also say that, like, these shouldn't be inherently easy or inherently what the schools are already doing. I think they should be somewhat aspirational, and it should be to push the schools to do better. And we can always take take things away later if they don't make sense. But if you look up the schools in this district, pretty low performance compared to the rest of the state. And so having a more aspirational goal to improve the district, I think would be great.
Great, any other discussion? All right, then not hearing any, the motion, who made the motion? Was it Natalie? Okay, so your motion, do you mind a friendly amendment to move that sentence to where we want it?
Yes.
Okay, and who seconded it? Derek, was that, or no, Barbara? Okay, do you mind making that friendly amendment as well? Okay, so all of those in favor of global ends with the moving of that one sentence to wherever we put it, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. All right,
That 2 nays.
2 nays. Okay, thank you. Find my agenda, sorry. All right, the next one is 4.5, Board Members Code of Conduct. We had looked at revising this and removing, this is our 4.5. We had talked about removing anything that was conflict of interest because we have a conflict of interest policy through RNESU. So this, what you have in your packet, still has all the conflict of interest stuff in it. Or did we decide to put in, well, it wouldn't make sense that we would have put
No,
in.
we were removing that.
That's what I thought.
And it was
doesn't
gonna
have-
be like 1 through 6 or something.
Yeah. Because this is too long now. All right, we're gonna have to table this. I want to look at it again. So I'll bring that back to the next meeting. Asset protection 2.6, revised, we were adding 0.12, which was the naming of facilities. So you'll notice at the bottom of policy 2.6, which is an executive limitation, for Kristen, it says, the superintendent shall not allow the naming of any program or facility without a procedure in place that includes verification that the named person's actions or perceived values will not detract from the mission and vision of the board as identified in the ends policy of the board. And so we had also asked Kristen to bring forward an admin memo that talks about the naming of programs and facilities, which is the next thing in your packet, which hopefully you were able to review. So, can I get someone to make a motion, please, to accept? Okay, Barbara and, okay, Natalie seconded, all right. So, discussion.
So I have a question. This is the bottom of page 51 of 62.
Is this the policy or is this the admin
This
memo?
is the admin memo.
Okay,
It's under the review and approval process.
okay,
And the sentence that I'm asking about is the superintendent reserves the right in all cases to refuse to name a particular property. Just want to know what the logic of that is.
You mean like if the whole board approved it, it's just decline?
I don't understand what's going on with that sentence.
So this was, this is a new admin memo. It was vetted by our school attorney who said you really do want that language in case you have a, say the Otter Creek Academy modular. Someone comes to you and says, I'll give you, I'm coming up with something completely out of the blue, but that you should always have the right to say that's a property that we will not name, right? That's the Otter Creek modular for whatever reason, I don't know. It was attorney level.
Okay.
You don't wanna name it the Hubert.
I mean, I really do, but it's not on the table for tonight.
Alright.
That's why, just the attorney. And this is an admin memo, so I can change it.
Maybe it should say the superintendent reserves the right to recommend to the board that we don't. Right? I don't know if you, I'm trying to think why the lawyer wanted you to make the unilateral decision to not name something. I understand the need to reserve the right to not name something. We should have that right. I just don't know if that should fall on you to make that determination.
Is it because it's an admin memo, it doesn't mention us?
Well, you're a part of
Because I
it,
see it
the
earlier.
input. Generally speaking, most school districts that do it have a committee, not the board, and the committee includes board membership, right? And so then it's that committee that goes back, but we're policy governance, so we don't do side committees, so it's a little different. So I'm happy to take that sentence out or change it to the superintendent reserves the right in consultation with the school board to
Yeah.
refuse to name a particular. I just don't
Yeah.
care. I'm completely fine with it. I can shift it in a second.
I wasn't necessarily objecting, I was just didn't understand what was going on.
All good.
Okay.
Do people want that?
I think with consultation, just to make it clear.
And you may not always be here, right? So we don't know who the next superintendent is, so, you know, it's.
Hey,
I think we should name our modules like they name football stadiums, just sell the rights to some giant corporation.
Marlboro.
Yeah, there you go.
alright,
Do
so
you want to see, do you want to see that back or?
no, because the admin memo doesn't get voted on.
Right, that you don't care.
I don't care to see it again, everybody saw you make the change. Does anybody have any discussion regarding 2.6.12, adding that to our executive notation? Hearing none, all those that agree with 2.6.12, naming of facilities, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. There was one.
Is it a yea or a nay?
No, I think she was saying, okay. All right, so the next one is OVU policy for action. It's the first reading, it's executive limitation policy 2.0, safety. Can I get someone to make a motion regarding this?
This would be accept the safety policy.
Okay, and thank you.
Greg?
Greg, yep. And you want to talk about it first?
Not really. I mean, it came up, I drafted it because I think it was Jeremy had talked about at one of the board meetings, like, but where do we talk about safety? And we talked about adding in an executive limitation, so this is just a draft.
Okay.
And what's the number? 'Cause I don't see it on.
It would be 2.10, because it would be an executive limitation. So you can add that to that, but it would be 2.10. Anybody have any questions? This is just a first reading, we would have to do a second reading before it would become final.
But,
Sure.
I think it's really funny how it's done this way, but don't all these have to be negative and positive? And all the limitations, this thing is thou shall nots, not thou shalls.
Yeah.
Positive on that, so.
I know, I like that, I like how it, I just like the
I
policy.
hate all the negatives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so it's really bad language in some of these, that like, we shall. There was a funny one, there was a double negative to make it into, so, yeah. I think it's the equity one. that?
We could leave it like this, there's nothing wrong with.
So we don't have to do it that way? Okay.
What about, communication to the community?
You mean, should it be in here, or you
Yeah.
didn't see it in here?
Number 10. Oh, this, sorry, that's not, doesn't talk about the community.
We need to communicate, I just know, because I'm on the ASHA committee at college, we have a communication plan to the greater community as well, especially parents. I would think that should be in there, how we communicate to parents in an emergency situation.
As an executive limitation, or that we have a plan in place, because we do have
Yes,
a
that we
plan.
have, it doesn't say it here though.
We do have we have a safe schools plan, we have emergency operating plans. But so you want you could have a bullet that says, will develop.
So that's already in there, so you're saying.
We have an emergency operations plan and a district communications plan, which is new for us, we haven't had that, we're finishing drafting that. But both do talk about who communicates with the media, who communicates with parents, when and where. So we do have that, so we could add a bullet with that.
What, are those RNESU policies?
Those aren't policies,
Oh,
those
they're
are
just
state
protocols?
requirements.
Okay.
So we don't have enough EOP, right, it's in place.
We do have an EOP.
In place, or it's in draft form?
We have the EOP in place, a district communication plan,
It's
and it's not.
Okay.
We have an emergency op plan. So I thought I handled it with accordingly, the superintendent will develop a safe schools plan. That's really an emergency op plan. But we could add a bullet that said, create, like that, instead of that, add a bullet that specifically means that emergency operations plan and a district communications.
I think it's really important that we have an emergency operations plan. I know we do, but it's good to state it, that we have it, so that
And then
it's
you
there
can
for
show
the
it as
future.
evidence.
Yeah, I think communication's a good thing to stress.
So do you just want me to change the language, accordingly the superintendent will develop a capital letter, emergency capital operations capital plan, EOP, followed, so that's kind of the top, or do you want it to be a number, like a bullet? Because all of these bullets are in our emergency operations plan.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. You don't have a bullet here that says communication.
So create a district communications plan as a bullet.
Yeah, a bullet point under here.
Perfect.
I don't think you need
Procedures to
call it
develop and disseminate a district communications plan.
to the greater parents and the greater community. I don't think you need to specifically say accordingly the superintendent will develop an EOP.
Well, that's already.
Well, that's
in there.
already up there in that in the second paragraph, it essentially talks about your EOP.
But it doesn't specifically say emergency operations plan, which is a specific type of.
We're changing it.
So
Instead
you're
of it saying safe schools, it's gonna, safe schools plan, it's gonna say emergency
Okay.
operations plan.
So that won't be a bullet point, it'll just be the change of the wording.
The only new bullet would be procedures to develop and disseminate a district communications plan that addresses community, media.
You've got the wording for the minutes, so, okay.
Are you taking the minutes?
She is.
I'm doing my best.
I'll send you the report.
I'm doing my best. I didn't realize Charlene wasn't here for about 10 minutes, so.
I have it recorded.
So the first part of the meeting,
All right, is there any other discussion, additions, deletions to this policy? We'll clean it up, we'll add that stuff, and you'll see it again in a month. But we do need to take a vote, unless there's any other discussion. Okay, all those in favor of 2.10, safety executive limitation, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are we voting on how it was just a minute?
amended, or is that just?
With that amendment, yep, and then it'll come back in a month and you can,
Aye.
okay, thank you. Those, opposed? Okay. 2.10, thank you. We will see that again in December. All right, board recruitment, board member recruitment, current board members' intentions and open seats. So those of you who have been appointed to the board, you know that you have to rerun for your seat. Those of you who are up for, your term is up, you need to either decide if you're going to rerun or do something else. If you are not planning on running again, please let us know so that we can start looking for someone else, or at least get the word out so that interested people can get a ballot and get that started. Who is, yeah,
I thought I was on.
I thought you were too, and you're not on there.
Did you verify this?
I did
Oh, okay.
I can.
Belinda
I
did it
just
with
don't,
the
I mean,
towns.
all of a sudden I might not be on the board because I didn't run.
Do you want me to text Belinda?
You don't have to
Or
let
she
me know
verified
now.
it?
I mean,
I'm
you
just
can let me
going to-
know at the next, I don't have to get it in until January. so
Right.
I
Till
just
January, right?
Don't have
I'll
to
check
do
with
an email.
Belinda.
Well, no, I'm not doing an email. I was just gonna look at board members.
I looked on the website and
Yeah.
it was the same thing, so I don't know what it
Okay.
is. So,
Yeah, the website doesn't say it. Yours just says 2 seats. And yours wouldn't be one of them.
so didn't Devin and Jeremy just run?
They didn't run, no, they got appointed to
Oh,
the
yeah,
board,
yeah.
that's why they
Okay.
Okay. So. All right. No action at this point, just keep that in mind. RNESU board update. So, Becky, do you remember what we did at our last meeting?
You're testing my memory.
We talked about the policies that we approved during the consent agenda. And we're talking about budget in 2 weeks because our NESU budget needs to be done before Otter Valleys and Barstow.
We went over some of the policies, sorry, I didn't have that.
Yep, right, which were on the consent agenda. Yep,
Picking up the code of conduct because I read it.
right, yep. Anything else? Okay, boring, all right. So, Hawk Hill update, any annual report?
I have a one-pager for folks, because I just got some information on Monday to update folks.
No. You want the next one?
Go and get a copy of this.
So we're gonna skip that.
I'll just read it for the recording.
Thank you.
The committee met 3 times so far this year, and 2 initiatives were explored. One related to our archaeology priority, and the other related to a community lumber project. The archaeology initiative began as a request from the Brandon Historical Group to do some metal detecting exploration on the Hawk Hill historical sites. But the committee reflected on its management plan for guidance and decided that the request was a small part of a larger need for a school-based archaeology program. This idea was explored with the Vermont State archaeologist, Mr. Robinson, who supported the notion and agreed to consult with faculty and students. The timing, however, is not right for new program development at OV this year and is on pause for now. There were some initial contacts made, and there's some real interest and some possibilities for the future. The community project you heard about at our last meeting, I believe, of OV students participating in the whole process from tree to table. It's a project for the creation of library furniture from Hawk Hill lumber as part of a larger library renovation activity, the Brandon Public Library. The board supported the request and it's moving forward. Len Schmidt, Mark, who's the Stafford forestry instructor, and Corey Cregan, the area county forester, walked the Ridge Trail and found that there's a lot of possibilities in that area for trees to select, and that would be good for forest management. Safe trees for students from Stafford to Felon. Also includes a mix of species and log sizes and grades that would work well for the library. Len met with Molly Kennedy of the library to review the renovation blueprints, and the most likely places to use Hawkville lumber seem to be the conference room table, smaller study table, circulation desk possibly, and some children's book cubbies. Many of these would be on casters so that they would be portable and they could redesign spaces inside the library. And these are suited to solid lumber to show off the wood most visibly. The next step is for Josh Hart to meet with the forester on getting students out into the forest to learn about forest management objectives and practices, and select some trees to harvest based on some management. So it's going forward. And in communication with Len, he's going to keep us informed as best he can, and I'll be reporting monthly.
Questions for Derek?
Yeah, these are both great ideas, and so the question I would have is there any discussion about what site to choose for archaeology for digging?
No.
I was just curious.
No,
there's a lot out there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of, the initial activity that would be done would probably be using LiDAR maps, LiDAR scanning, to look at the very detailed topography, and whatever group of students were looking at whatever section of that property, they would be able to target sites that they want to investigate based on the radar. Yeah. And that would be the beginning activity, and then they'd move from there to other levels.
Other questions? Okay. You don't need us to approve your update?
No, but point of information that we did have a meeting that there wasn't a quorum, and one of the questions that did come up was, and it has come up before, there was some interest in having some data about the usage of that property and how to go about determining that. And in attendance was our contact person from the Land Trust, Pamela Burlingame. And she said that there are many options out there for small, photoelectric sensors and whatnot that we could put on a trailhead to get a tally of activity. And I think we'll come back with and ask for some of that equipment so that we have some data on the usage of that.
Okay. All right, yeah, thank you. Facilities update. The next page in your packet was a detailed list of where we are with summer projects. And so that was in there for your information. Brenda will be speaking to it directly at our next meeting, but she wanted to make sure you had this information prior. So if you have any questions, hold them over until then. Ely Trust action. So, as most of you are aware, Neshbe has a trust fund set up called the Ely Trust Fund. Some of you may not be aware of that. It is a fund that was established by the Elys for support for Neshbe School. So it is a trust fund that we inherited when we merged. Currently, the Ely funds are in two separate accounts. There's one that was with the Old People's Bank, which is now the Wilmington Trust, or M&T. Bank, and then the other one is with the Charles Schwab, which is managed by Mariner Investments. Brenda did a lot of legwork to ask the courts, because you have to go through probate in order to combine the two, because the People's Bank didn't want that money anymore. And so this motion that you see here is to allow, we have to have board action on it to move the money from M&T over to Charles Schwab. So if someone wants to make this sample motion, we can then talk about it.
Also.
Okay, so just so that we have it on recording, the motion is to transfer and close the Wilmington Trust M&T account titled Ely, TUW FBO Brandon Graded School to the Otter Valley Unified Union School UW Wiley A. Ely account held by Charles Schwab and managed by Mariner Investments, and to authorize Lori Bertrand or Barbara Eveling to sign any and all necessary paperwork to enact this transfer, including but not limited to receipt and release acknowledgements, board resolutions authorizing the transfer. So it was approved, or made a motion by Kevin, seconded by Derek. Any questions?
This is just a question about ancient history. I vaguely remember a discussion maybe 2 years ago about the Eden Fund and how the merger affected it. Is that now still limited to improvements for Nashville?
It is. So it can only be used for Neshua. That will be the way it always is. And right now, we use funds every year out of that to pay the debt service for the boiler system that we did over there. And that, I think we have another 10 years left.
Yep.
I just have a logistical question. Before you sign anything, the lawyer looks at it, or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dina, of course, looks it up. Yep. Okay. Any other questions? We do also have another trust fund, which is set up for the benefit of Lothrop, which is the Burdick Fund, but just so that people know that. So we do have two trust funds. Okay, so all of those in favor of the motion that I just said, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, thank you. Do that. Budget update. So as you know, we don't have a budget in front of us because Brenda is still talking with principals, or may have finished up that work. Okay, last week.
Central office and federal office.
Okay, so we will have that to look at our December 2nd meeting. Whatever.
And she will be here the next board meeting to talk about facilities with principals to talk about their budget and facility priorities.
That's right. So, any other questions about the budget at this point? Until we have a budget, there really isn't much to talk about, but. Okay,
I've got some, but I can wait.
all right, reviewed our board annual work plan. So the work plan is in your packet as well. As you see, for our next meeting on November 15th, we will be talking about the equity audit, next steps for that. We'll also be having the facilities discussion with all of the principals coming. It will be at OCA, where there is now a trailer there.
Modular.
Whatever.
Modulars.
I saw it actually get moved in.
I know.
Happened to drive in.
I got pictures, my son sent me pictures. Mom, look, there's a trailer.
It's not as bad as I thought.
So-
It's actually.
No, it actually kind of looks almost like a house.
Yeah, it like kind of works.
Yeah. So,
I think they're finishing.
right, so hopefully we'll be able to walk through it, I'm hoping. Very hopeful. On our November 15th meeting at Otter Creek Academy at Leicester. And we will also be talking about other things, I'm sure. But anyway, so that is for our next meeting in November 15th. Any other, finalizing annual board priorities. So that is on there because we needed to approve our ends before we could actually have board priorities. So the question is that if you look at our work plan, it tells you what our board priorities were from 21 and 22. The annual priorities were to have an equity professional development for the board, monitoring of policies, policy governance, professional development at board meetings, pursue facility options, and ensure board member participation and discussion. So those were our board priorities for 21 and 22. The question is do we want to continue those into 22, 23? Because I don't think we've finalized any of those.
So we requesting finalizing tonight?
I just want to know if those are the same if we want to keep those priorities or if we have new ones. But mainly we're talking about facilities, making sure we have policy governance and or good governance training, and continue making sure that our policies and everything that we do is equitable. I think I summarized that. Wait. So, I just want to know if you guys are good with that or if you want to add something or delete something or.
Can we just remove equity professional development? So any kind of professional development?
Oh, sure, you want to just say.
So it's not limited to equity?
Sure. If everybody else is okay with that. Everybody else okay with that? Yes. Yes. That's yes, no? You? Are you okay with that, Becky? I didn't look up there. Okay. All right, everybody else okay? You're okay with that? Are you okay with that? Okay. Excellent. Glad you're here. All right, so we will remove equity. We will just have board professional development, and we'll add those where we can. So that takes care of that bullet, unless somebody has something else to say about it. Okay. Communications and support to the board.
Ely Trust, we already chatted about that. This is the official schedule for the safety audit, which is happening next week. We had a bunch of administrators up in Burlington today at the Governor's Safety Conference, so we're really putting a lot of work into that. NAEP scores were released. That's the nation's report card, and unsurprisingly, students across the board we saw unprecedented declines. So that's kind of out there. So having your ends really focusing on academic proficiency and achievement seems to make sense. The biggest thing to know there, and I talked about that in this in my state of the state in August when we had our first meeting in September, that the pandemic definitely had punishing consequences for students for this injustice, right? Students who were historically marginalized, the gap has grown. Again, that's the main report card. Lead and water update. We keep testing, keep working. The only building that still is getting flagged is OB. They had two more tests they had to remediate. One is repaired. They're left with one that is still at the app or above level. That I believe is in the athletic office. It's not a drinking faucet. It will remain off out of use until the faucet is either replaced or the tap is retested again. So they've remediated that several times to no avail. Just an FYI for the board, overnight field trip, the 23 varsity baseball spring training trip is being planned. They hope to travel to Florida or Myrtle Beach. For that trip, it will occur throughout April vacation. I just did want to recognize that Brandon Chamber of Commerce invited the RNASU administrators. It was wonderful. It was a great chance to meet, mingle, and really talk about what everyone's priorities were and have people put some names to faces, and that was great. So I do want to thank the RNASU administrative team, but also the Chamber of Commerce for their hospitality and support. As we did hear someone mention, the Superintendent Series video last week had more hits than ever. I think that's because we finally showed kids and shockingly good strategy. The next one will feature Barstow and maybe some Otter Creek students in there, but that's going really well, so we're excited about that. Open seats, again listed there. And we do have our first Parent Advisory Council meeting happening next week. Our membership is somewhere around 12 or 13, I think. And the Student Advisory Council is set to meet prior to the November recess. Just trying to schedule it for the adults for participation. That's it.
Oh, okay. So, I've been asked to ask if the students would like to report to me.
There's a student council meeting was, if you guys like Kukula Cookie Dough, the senior class is selling Kukula Cookie Dough. I'm putting it out there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Meeting, we're gonna have meetings, three committees, two of them, one of them we're gonna have a meeting with Mr. Ruffin. John Ruffin. Discuss that. We already heard from the first meeting. We already heard from the first, at a meeting just after that. We asked him about that. We relayed that information. Leeway. And then we're gonna have a meeting in this efforts about the meals, contract for that. And so there's any say for it. And you and I will go quarterly meeting, there's a lot more for next week.
And in 2 weeks, I think there's something going on that you're both involved.
I don't know what's up there.
You might want to announce it so that people will
Yes.
come.
Yeah, so the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th, Obi Walking Stick Theater is doing their annual musical, you can all show up. I encourage you to come, please come. I'm okay.
All shook up.
All show up. It's all Elvis.
It's all
music.
Elvis.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Great.
Yeah.
And concession stands will be open.
Ooh, really? I didn't know that. Cool.
Really, really.
Can you give me the dates again, please?
Yes, the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. The 17th, 18th, and 19th are at 7, and the 20th is at probably 2.
So there will be a Sunday night.
Yes.
Yep.
To get back to the superintendent's report for a second, I just wanted to emphasize the NAEP scores. It's an indication of the effect that the COVID lockdowns had on our students, and throughout the from the youngest to the oldest. I was just talking to someone this afternoon saying that Paget's class, this is the first probably normal school year you've had in the 4 years.
It is.
And it's a great loss not only to your class and to yours, but there are all these deficits among little children. We just have a lot of work to do to make up for that. And that's something that the board, I know the teachers are working hard on it. I support something that the board needs to keep in mind as a priority for some time.
Yeah, just adding to that, I was in 7th grade when I got in 2020. I just moved to January, so I had like 3 months. And just the deficit and how I did myself, it was dramatic. Just seeing that, and then even the year after, 2021 or 2020, 8th grade, when we were back in school, just seeing the improvement was very interesting. It was great to see how big the difference it made. But it was a wake-up call, which I was lucky because it was a wake-up call in middle school, and it wasn't a wake-up call all the way in high school.
Yeah, the first time I met Susanna White, I was a TA for Miss Callahan's class, and I'm watching she was having a meeting with Mom and Nick, the Spanish teacher, one of them, and they just started asking me all these questions, and I was like, oh, this is okay. And like through like that conversation, kind of, I realized that it was with Doug last year, right? I realized that like that not only did my academic like standard go down pretty far in those like 3 years or whatever, but also like my
Social
there we go. And my like mental health rapidly declined absolutely in those 3 years or whatever. But like looking at me and looking at my sisters too. My sisters are in 7th grade this year, my brother's kids, and And like, those 3 years, like I wonder what kind of people would be if they opted kids their age, you know, at that time.
That piggybacks on my
Yeah.
comment about, I mean, we're talking about scores, but you can't talk about that in a vacuum, right? We need to talk about what affected the scores, and mental health, I think, has a lot to do with it, and that's something that we need to address. Not just what academics are provided, but what are the resources available to kids to bring them up to this level where they need to be, because they did lose so much.
Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for a week from Tuesday. It is a Tuesday, the 15th of November at OCA, so that we can see a modular building along with the school building at Otter Creek Academy at Leicester. So, there's nothing.
Is that at 6?
It starts at 6, yes. So if there's nothing else to talk about, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, your way of saying yes is to leave. So, thank you.